Minot State University's school psychology program has received a $4.3 million grant from the Department of Education. Our Crystal Quao headed to campus to speak with some of the recipients.
The series of events that leads someone to decide where to plant their career goals is unpredictable. Taylor Smock, a first-year graduate student at Minot State, has family loosely connected to the field. Her dad was a special ed teacher, for example.
And I was like, what is school psychology? And then I got into it and I was like, oh, this looks really interesting.
Another student says they got advice from an aunt who works as a school psychologist in Grand Forks schools.
She was like, this is a good opportunity. I know you would do well. You'll really excel in your courses. Like, this is something you should really look into. And I'm so glad I listened to her.
Current and incoming students to the MSU School Psychology program will get tuition, books, fees, and other resources covered by this grant.
It's a wonderful thing, and a difficult grant to get too, which speaks really well to Dr. Craven's work on that.
The grant includes child care allowances and funding for training opportunities outside North Dakota.
To be honest, it feels really good. Not only will I get to work with people on the reservation, like Native Americans on the reservation, which I've never done before, and getting to go to NASP and get training there.
The $4.3 million grant will be spread across 5 years to roughly 30 students. Dr. Penny Craven, director of the school psychology program, says it has increased applications.
The purpose was to lift all barriers from students from diverse backgrounds and from low-income backgrounds.
Craven says for every 500 students in North Dakota, there's one school psychologist. On the Minot State University campus, I'm Crystal Quao reporting for your news leader.
Once their schooling is over, recipients have a 3-year service requirement at a North Dakota school in need of school psychologists.